allegiance. Oops. Didn't hit the thing. Please call the roll.
Anderson, Barbaza,
Here.
Burton,
Here.
Murray,
Here.
Totfest,
Here.
Smithwick Gailey,
Here.
Vadla.
Here. All right, approving the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? It's pretty short and sweet tonight. Are there any objections to approving the agenda? Hearing none, agenda is approved. Now we're approving the minutes of our last meeting on June 1st. Are there any changes to those minutes? Any objections to approving the minutes? Hearing none, minutes are approved. There's no presentations with prior notice, nor public hearings, nor unfinished business or new business. Are there any, is anybody on Zoom in the public? All right, good, we're good to go there. And there are no informational items. Is Justin on? Okay. So we don't have a council member or the city manager with us, but John, do you want to make a report or save it for the work session?
Just a couple things, and I'll try to make it short so you can make this the world's fastest planning and zoning commission meeting.
2 minutes.
At one point, we talked about our August meeting possibly being switched or revised, and that looks like it's not going to happen. We're going to have a regular meeting time, so the first Wednesday in August. I'd like to say welcome to Sonia. Thank you for joining the Planning Commission. Appreciate your service to the city, and we now have a full commission, seven members.
Thank you.
And then the last thing is, two more things. One, the street rename that you worked on is going to City Council next week, Wednesday, and so that will be interesting to see how that plays out. But that's going forward. If you want to, listen in or attend, you're more than welcome. And then the last thing is that we hope to get the RFP for the Riverfront redevelopment project out on Friday at the latest. Cool. So that'll be out on the streets for about 4 weeks. And we'll have a point in between where we'll take questions and have a Zoom meeting with potential candidates. And then, say, August 5th is the deadline. And then after that, council has to go through its motions to approve. So that would probably be mid to late August before a notice to proceed would go forward. And that's all I've got.
Thank you, John. Associate Planner Hester.
I wanted to welcome Sonia as well. Sonia comes here and she has been a citizen of Soldotna for a very long time, and she seems to have a wealth of knowledge of the Canite Edina as well as just local history. So excited to hear her perspective.
Awesome. All right. Now it's time for commissioner comments, and we'll start over with Dennis, and then we'll go this way. And you don't have to if you don't want to, but Dennis and Sonia, you're new, and if you want to give a little intro of who you are and why you're excited to serve on this commission, we'd love to hear that.
Just congratulations to John and to Jenny for the receiving the grant for the redevelopment. Good job.
I wanted to welcome Sonia, and it's exciting to have you here. And that's it.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Sonia?
So I've been a resident of Soldotna since I was 12, and I'm actively involved with the tribes, local tribes. I sat on the committee that built the playground and was part of the connection to the Dena'ina speaker. So I love to see that continue. And I noticed the plans, John and Jen shared with me the plans that are in for changing the face of Soldotna. And good friends of mine helped with the design of the new Welcome to Soldotna. And so whatever year that started, I'm like, oh, cool. Soldotna is starting to pay attention to its city. And that just drew a lot of excitement from within me that we can build a better city for our citizens, have it be more welcoming. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. It's so great to have a full commission, and I do think there's some, maybe it's in our 2030 plan, some wayfinding signs, or where is that? But that's there's so many great places to add history and language into the city to be part of our place. So that's all I have for tonight. I think that technically that means we adjourn with a 6-minute meeting, which is pretty great. The next regular meeting will be held August 3rd at 5:30 here, and there's lots of ways to participate in person or telephonically. But now I do have to stay and hang out for a very exciting accessory dwelling unit work session.
So our work session will start here, and I just want to remind everybody, if they do have comments, and I hope you all do have comments and questions, please use your mic, because this is all still being recorded. And we know in the past when Jen and I have done this and we've gone back to gather notes and information, if folks are like up pointing at the map, or if they forget to turn their mic on, it can be hard to hear and hard for us to then go back and hear what all the comments were, so please do that. Tentatively, wayfinding is on the capital budget for this coming year. So good news, we should have dollars allocated for us to go out and start that process. And accessory dwelling units has been on our list for some time. There's been a number of folks who have been asking about the ability to create accessory dwelling units for a number of reasons. And so we finally put together a draft code, and we want to share that with you, and we want to get your feedback on it, your comments, suggestions, critique, and we will then take that, and also we hope to do a work session with City Council, and we'd share your feedback with them as well. So let's see if I can figure this out. So in general, you know that accessory dwelling units are typically smaller in size than the principal unit. The goal for most communities when they develop these regulations are to maintain community character, and they do that by trying to ensure that the accessory dwelling unit matches the character of the principal unit. Purpose and intent. So these are kind of the basic reasons why we think that we should be allowing ADUs in Soldotna. The first one is that it allows more efficient use of our existing residential zone land, our housing stock, our existing infrastructure. If we can hook another unit into our already existing sewer and water, that's a plus for everybody. It allows us to respond to changing family and community demographics. So if we've got parents that want to age at home, we can provide a space for that. We can provide a space for our kids. We can provide a space for the single person that moves up to Alaska that's never been here before, and they've got their place of their own rather than perhaps an apartment. It provides a broader range of accessible and more affordable housing within the city. So hopefully this will increase the can you check, Jen? Someone's at the front, thanks. I thought her, okay, oh, it's okay, thank you. Post office delivering late. So we talked about affordability a little bit, and then last, protect neighborhood stability, property values, single-family residential appearance. So those are the reasons that a lot of folks are adopting codes and the intent behind them. So this, what we're proposing touches a huge number of sections of our code, of our zoning code and of our minor enforcement code and of our sewer and water code. So what you're going to see tonight is a number of different sections, and we're going to start by going through the zoning sections. And I should also mention, there's also 3 or 4 housekeeping items that as we went through this, we identified historic issues and problems in these different sections of code that for a long time we've wanted to address, but they haven't had the opportunity. Opening it up for the ADU gives us that opportunity to insert these housekeeping changes. And so I'll point those out as we go along. So the definition, what is an accessory dwelling unit? It's a subordinate detached dwelling unit which provides basic requirements for living, sleeping, cooking, and sanitation, added to a lot or parcel with an existing residence. So in this case, it's only, the key word there is detached, and 2 keywords, and subordinate. We are not considering someone who builds on to their existing building, like you see in the photo to the bottom, to be an ADU or an accessory dwelling unit. We would consider that essentially a duplex. And we allow for that, whether it's in the upstairs, the downstairs, or an attachment to the left, right, or back or front. There are, and we'll actually get to that here in just a little bit, but generally duplexes are allowed in most zoning districts in the city, most residential zoning districts in the city. There's only one, the single family zoning district, where duplexes are not allowed.
What about if they converted their garage?
If the garage was attached, it would be considered a duplex.
Okay.
If it was detached, we would consider an accessory dwelling unit. So we'll start with the single-family residential district. So as Jen has got pointed out there on the map or the photo, the single-family residential district is tiny. It's the smallest zoning district in the city, and it only affects about 15, maybe 20 parcels. The rest of the city is zoned, for residential anyway, zoned single-family, 2-family, rural residential, or multifamily residential. And what you've got there now in front of you and what you're going to see going forward is at the top, you've got the name of the district that we're going to be dealing with. Section D is accessory uses and structures. What I've left out is A, B, and C, which are the principally permitted uses and the conditional uses, and one other, which general standards, okay. And so we're only talking now about the accessory uses and structures, this one section. So currently, already in the code is what you see in number 1. So there's no change there. When you see things that are underlined, that's going to represent new code. And I should say with one caveat, when we cut and paste the stuff into the presentation, those hot links to like section 1710.305, they stay in there and stay underlined. So they're not new. They're just kind of a relic of what we get when we cut and paste. So the new language under accessory dwelling units, it states accessory dwelling units are permitted provided they comply with the special requirements found in section 1710.390, accessory dwelling units, and section 305, accessory units. So this is basically saying that if you want to put in an ADU, we're going to treat it as an accessory use, and it's going to have to follow the standards that are in section 390, which we will get to here in just a little bit. And this format, you'll see, is going to follow along for the next couple. So in the single-family, two-family, you'll see Jen has also provided a map showing the single-family, two-family district highlighted in green. And the language in section 2 there is exactly the same. It's saying accessory dwelling units are permitted provided they comply with the new section 390. The other thing I'll point out here too, in both the first one that we looked at, single family, and in single family, two family, is this right here, camping is limited. Camping is limited to 2 tents or RV units, not to exceed 30 days. And I call that to your attention because we're going to come to one of them here that does not have that. And that is one of our suggested changes, is to add that in. So now we're talking about the multifamily zoning district. Again, a relatively small number of parcels in the city are zoned multifamily, but accessory dwelling units would be allowed in the multifamily district as well. So the language is the same as what you've seen in the previous 2 slides. Rural residential. This one has changes to both number 1 and number 2. Number 1 is that camping sentence that is added there. It states camping is limited to 2 tents or RV units for a maximum of 30 days within 1 calendar year. This was added as a housekeeping item for unknown reasons. It was left off the rural residential, but included in all the others. And so we're recommending that be added. But the section 2 is, again, all new information, and it states that accessory dwelling units are permitted provided they comply with the special requirements found in section 390. I will have to look into that one. I'm not sure whether that was purposefully. I'll have to look into that one, but thank you for bringing that up because I don't see it there. No. Okay. So let's see here. The next one is section 305, accessory uses. This section of our code deals with, in general, accessory uses. Because of the change in the allowing now accessory dwelling units, we had to strike number 3. Number 3 reads, in the single-family, two-family districts, structures may include a single detached building to provide housing for relatives or temporary quarters for guests only where no charge is being made. The building may contain no more than 1. So that's removed because we're creating new standards that allow for a detached structure, but they don't have to be a relative. You can collect rent if you want to. It's basically taking out an old section of code that, as far as we know, has never been utilized. The other thing that's changed here is number 2 is being, again, a housekeeping item, and we're recommending that be struck from the code. It sets, this has always been in a confusing sentence that has been interpreted different ways. And what we're recommending is that it just be struck. We have in our general standards, height standards for all buildings in the zoning district. So this really, we feel, isn't necessary to have this additional language in the accessory use section. Number 1, 4, and 5 all would remain. Which ones? One and five accessory structure shall. Yeah. Yeah, that's, okay. 305. Combine 1 and 5. Yeah, no, we'll take a look at it. If, I mean, it's possible that just a comma, if it's the standards of the zoning district, that just gets added into it. That would shorten it yet. Yeah, thank you. It is not. So basically, this change would say that any building on a lot couldn't exceed the height standard. So, let me look. You could, correct. Yep, yes. Does that make sense, or is that cause any issues? Okay, okay. Okay. So, equal to?
So if you had a neighborhood of all ranch-style homes, somebody could build a two-story thing in their backyard?
Provided, yeah, as
And
you'll.
then everybody around would be ranch, and then you'd have this one sticking up?
Right. Yeah, it is, yeah,
Unless it blocks the sun.
right. And you'll see as we go forward, there actually is some, there's one of the standards, it has to do with the distance on a side lot line and the height of the building, where if it's over, I think it's 15 feet, instead of being required, the 5-foot side yard requirement, I think we've extended it to either 10 or 15 feet to provide a little additional space between adjoining properties. But this is a good point about the intent of the accessory dwelling units and the height requirements. So I'll make sure that gets noted. Right.
Yeah, but if there's like, say, a block with a bunch of them, then if it blocks the sun, I remember being in Chicago and how all those buildings are so tall and there's no sun anywhere. I'd hate for that to happen. In my backyard.
Okay, I appreciate that.
And they can rent them out? Is that what?
Yep, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. That's in section 390, all the standards for accessory dwelling units. Right now, we just finished up the zoning districts, and now this is another housekeeping item, a number of buildings per lot. What this does, it adds the rural residential zoning district to the list of zoning districts, where we allow only one principal building per lot, unless, of course, it's an ADU and is authorized, by the code. And the reason this is being modified is because we had an instance not too long ago where a developer had a 19-acre piece of property in the rural residential zoning district. And under this existing code, he could put up to 19 buildings on that lot without having to either submit a site plan or go through the subdivision process. So we had virtually no oversight, no control over the placement of buildings, whether they were provided, fire, things like the building code requires, fire protections, health and safety, or things like access to and from roads. So we were concerned that if we didn't add this in there, we might be setting ourselves up in the future for, again, another instance where we've got a developer that sees a creative way to or finds a loophole in the code and works his way around the regulations. So that's the reason behind here. So it adds rural residential, and it also adds that line unless authorized through other provisions of this code, and that is intended to point to Section 390, which is our ADU standards. That's the other provision, which would allow for another building on a lot. And the last, I believe, housekeeping item, one way for developers to work on large lots and have greater control is through a planned unit development, which essentially is like a conditional use permit where they create a development plan and it gets submitted to the Planning Commission and for your review and comments. The most recent one, and one that you're probably most familiar with that has occurred in Soldotna, is the Mountain Rose community. That's, I believe, a age 50 and up retirement type community. It's got, essentially, it's got, I think, maybe 4 lots within it with multiple buildings on each lot. It's got a 50-foot right-of-way. It's got, they maintain the streets within that development. So it's a unique development, and it was possible through this planned unit development or PUD code. And what we're recommending is that one more zoning district be added to where these can occur. And we're recommending that the commercial district be included. Because one of the things we're trying to encourage in our downtown is housing. And so we want to activate our downtown. We want to get people living there. We want to get them shopping there. So by allowing for PUDs in that commercial district, hopefully we'll allow for that to happen. Okay, here's the section you've all been waiting for. So this section, 1710.390, accessory dwelling units, pretty much the rest of the presentation here is all on these standards, on the ADU standards. So this is kind of going to be where the rubber meets the road on ADUs. The purpose and the intent is to create standards for accessory dwelling units. A site plan, zoning permit, and building permit would be required to have an ADU on your property. ADUs have to meet some general requirements. They have to maintain and be compatible with the appearance and character of the principal residence, lot, and neighborhood. They should be smaller in size than the principal dwelling on the lot and preserve yards and open space. And should provide adequate parking while maintaining the residential character of the neighborhood. And as you'll see, there are some standards that try to minimize the amount of paved and gravel surfaces on the site. Those standards basically require the use of the existing driveway rather than the creation of an additional driveway. Yes.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I was gonna ask. Does it have, would change the color?
Yeah. No, that's.
Like a bright orange.
Yeah. Well, when we yeah. So when we started this, we originally had this appearance in this section, the general standards. And we talked about it and realized exactly what you're pointing out. How are you going to regulate this? How are you going to deal with this? It's going to be impossible. So we thought, okay, let's put it in the general requirements. It's not a specific standard. It's, you should try to maintain and be compatible with the appearance and character. It's still, I'm not sure who's, I don't know that's anything that we'd ever be able to enforce. Because people will say, yeah, well, the color is the same, the windows are the same, it's got an arched entryway, it's got the same. It could be. So this definitely, I'm glad you guys pointed this one out. It's something that either we need to develop more specific standards that we can measure it by, or I think we need to get rid of it. And I'd be, again, be interested in hearing your thoughts.
I propose getting rid of it only because we've got a lot of really beautiful houses in town, and in some neighborhoods that maybe the ADU will be a lot nicer than, and it pulls.
I'll tell you, a couple of things that when the pitch of the roofs don't match.
Uh-huh.
They don't look like they go together.
Yeah.
It looks off. Although on the first page right here, you have a sample where they just have a completely different style and they don't fit together. Take a look, page 1 where they did a shed roof on there. Behind the gable roof, so this one right here.
Oh, okay.
So that one back there with the
Mhm.
shed roof, obviously it's not gonna match with the other roof, but they look good because they complement each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is if you have your house is square to the road, which hopefully it is, and then you put the other one over here, but you angle it a little bit because it's easier to get in the car and put the other off quicker. So I don't know if you could put in, because
Has
if
to
you
be
do it at
perpendicular.
common angle, again, right to the angle, or, I don't know, just not like a 6-degree angle, something like that, I know these are things that are hard to enforce, because some of those are easier than the crooked.
Yeah.
So there is
But if the plan could be to have them. Turn on your microphones.
Yeah, actually, you could just turn them on and leave them on.
Yeah, turn them on and leave them on, because we are having an informal conversation, which is great.
So I was going to mention there is a property at the end of the West Corral that I live on, and I live on the Kobuk, the school side of Kobuk. And at the end of the street on the left, I'm pretty sure that property has what we're talking about, is adding the.
It's actually a
unit.
shop, though, right?
Mm-hmm, the
Yeah,
2 log
and it's
cabins.
crooked.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
yes, that's what made me
Thank
think
you.
of
I
it.
actually went and asked Bob about that after the fact.
Oh,
So,
really?
Yeah, very crooked, yeah.
Huh.
So, 'cause they did a pretty nice job with it, but it's just like the house is square to the street, and then I don't know who decided where, because it doesn't look intentional in any way. The shop is quite big to be in the neighborhood, and it's like at an angle, slight angle to the street.
It's got a great view of the games, though.
Maybe that's why they angled it
Maybe.
such.
There you
I
go.
think that's what did the angle.
Maybe. It's like another devil's advocate comment on that. Like sometimes angling it can be helpful if you're putting up solar panels, or if you're wanting to catch the sun and have solar gain and save a little heating on your house. And I think there are neighborhoods throughout Alaska where there is not really any of this. Girdwood, the houses are very different, but it looks like a nice neighborhood when you walk around. So I'm hesitant to limit people's like taste or creativity on their own property when it comes to this stuff. And I'm more concerned about, can we say it out loud, hall quality homes, or homes that exist in town that aren't efficient, that aren't maybe built to last. I would rather put requirements that it be at least to a certain degree for heating in the winter, or I don't know how you do that, but basically shall be well insulated, shall be so that someone could live there comfortably in the winter. I would rather have those kinds of standards rather than aesthetics in this code for ADUs, because I do think these I think will be used more and more for short-term and long-term rentals, and so many friends who are taken advantage of in a home that has zero insulation in something like this. So it's just sort of slapped together and is used to make money, but not thinking about the people who will be there, often renters. So I think that's what I'm concerned about more so.
I think the building permit will cover that, won't it?
It should,
It'd have to be 2x6 construction? Is that,
I'm not sure.
or is that
about
a loan requirement? I don't know what building standards
Yeah,
are.
I'm not sure either, honestly. I don't know. I'm sure there are some minimal installation values that have to be met, but I'm not sure what they are.
Can it be as simple as putting a star rating on it, that they had to meet a minimum of a 4-star rating?
Heck yeah. Great idea. I think we haven't had such standards in the past, but it makes sense now because we have the technology to do it. And I think.
Then do you have to upgrade the existing structure?
Nah, that's grandfathered in.
I don't have my house in town anymore, but it was definitely not warm in there.
Right, but
2
now,
by 4
if
construction.
these are going to be new construction, we should have some better standards.
Dennis, you brought this up. What are your thoughts?
Well, just the enforceability piece, and one person's perspective is not the same as another person's perspective in terms of what looks good and is compatible with the neighborhood. And we all value our property rights and want to be able to do whatever we want to do on our property as long as we can meet the zoning requirements. So somebody will be creative in this area, I'm sure. And so do you plan for that exception, or do you say, well, our goal is that we want something, and of course the person building, if they're going to be building a new building, they're going to be spending a lot of money, number one, because the cost of a 2x4 is not cheap these days, as we all know. And so one would have to assume they're going to do their best to improve the property value, because they're going to ultimately either sell it, at some point. That's a reasonable expectation. Most of the people that would be creating these accessory units, I think, are thinking about a relative. I don't think they're thinking about a rental necessarily. There might be a few, but I would think the larger proportion of folks is, I've got a mother-in-law who can't stay, who needs a place or will need a place soon, and we need to do something.
Yeah, and that's how I vision it, not as a bunch of rentals going in people's backyards.
Although it is a unique opportunity for providing low-income housing for singles or couples that don't have, that maybe could afford to rent a 600-square-foot house.
I see it as like short-term Airbnbs in the summer. I feel like that's what would motivate.
Right. That would motivate someone to do it because they would have a little bit of an income opportunity and the benefit of the increased property.
And one would have to assume that,
Property value.
since it's not a single home on a lot, you're not dealing with so much driveway and all of that. You're assuming that there might be a walkway and that people will use a common driveway. So you're not building more driveways necessarily. And so those are all expenses that you would have if you were doing something on one lot.
Yeah.
Is there a time limit on when they have to have it finished? Like
trying to remember. I
someone
think there
starts
is.
building and then doesn't put siding on it for 3 years or.
I believe under this next section,
Oh.
we'll
You're
see
thinking of in the borough.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking right now, I have someone took some old trailer and it looks like a Pokemon ball and put it right next in their backyard. So I look at that every day. It's red and white. It's like, and so that's why I'm thinking, is it going to look?
Okay,
It does.
well,
It looks like a Pokemon.
are there any other comments about the appearance one?
Not appearance, I have a comment on number 3, that bullet point, adequate parking. I have a little concern with looseness of that phrasing. What I think of is if there's an ADU, if, say, the primary residence has 2 cars and ADU has 2 cars, they're parking on the street, which in the summer, that's not too much of a big deal, but in the winter time, I know my street, any cars that park on the side, anytime the plow comes through, we have issues. And so I don't know if it would be helpful to further define adequate parking to limiting how much could be on the side of the street, and then redefine X number of cars need to be designated off-street parking.
We've got in the general standards section coming up, we do have it further defined. And I'll be curious whether once we get to it, whether you think it's adequate.
Okay.
So general standards, the following general standards apply to the as requirements for the permitting and operation of an ADU. So there's a bunch of them. There's, I believe, 15 different standards that apply. And so we'll just go through these one at a time. The first one is that accessory dwelling units may be permitted within the single-family, two-family, rural residential, and multifamily districts. So those are the ones that we already kind of went through, where we have added additional language to specifically allow them as accessory uses. Number 2 is accessory dwelling units are not permitted on lots having an existing two-family principal use within the single-family, two-family zoning district. The intent of that is if you've already got a duplex in the two-family district, then a third unit wouldn't be appropriate.
Why?
Because it's no longer a single-family, two-family. Essentially, we've got 3 families in the district.
It's becoming multifamily.
Right. Right. So if you've got a single family, which most are, in the single family, two-family district, there aren't that many duplexes. Most are single family. So it's going to affect, that would affect a relatively small number of lots within the city. Third, one detached ADU may be created on a lot, tract, or parcel, provided an existing habitable dwelling is already on the parcel. So yeah, you've got to have a livable structure before you can have a ADU. 4, they're permitted only on lots, parcels, tracts that meet our minimum zoning size requirements. So if somebody has a substandard lot, it's already developed, you're not allowed to expand beyond that. We want to get, that gets back to that original, one of those intents in preserving open space and the available land in between buildings. 5 is lot coverage. Lot coverage of the principal dwelling unit and all accessory structures combined, including but not limited to the ADU, shall be less than or equal to the maximum lot coverage allowed by the zoning district. So currently under our code, we have a maximum lot coverage. In almost, I think it's all of them, it's a 20% is the maximum lot coverage. So that means 80% of the lot is open to other uses. It could be a driveway, it could be your lawn, it could be just like in my yard, most of it's still forested and it's not lawn because I don't like to cut lawn. So what this is saying is that you can add the ADU, but you still can't go over that maximum lot coverage percentage. And in most cases, this is not going to be a problem. I can't think honestly of an example where we've got a house that's 20% of the lot already. Our lots at 20,000 square feet, for example, right? Mm-hmm. That's, we're talking about big houses. So anyway,
I have a question. Do we currently have a minimum home size?
No.
So what if someone did have quite a small home on a bigger lot? It couldn't become the accessory dwelling if they wanted to build a primary dwelling? Like if maybe
sure.
Maybe through a...
I think we would allow that to, I don't see a reason why we wouldn't allow that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's disallowed right here, so it would just have to be through Just because if the ADU has to be smaller than the original,
So, yeah.
it says
they
it may
would've-
be created provided an existing habitable dwelling unit already exists on the lot
Right.
or parcel. Seems like they could build a,
So
bigger
right
house.
now, if there's a small, tiny house on the lot, we would be considering that to be the principal dwelling unit. And it's under the percent, the maximum lot coverage. And they want to apply for another permit and then have that become their principal use and their old principal use become the accessory use. I don't see any issue or, based on that language that would prevent that from happening.
okay, I thought that it said it had to be smaller than the existing. I don't
And
see
it-
that
and
in
it-
it.
and it would be, because if
You'd
you're.
swap them.
Yeah, you said
Okay.
you'd swap them, right?
But that would have to be at the front end of the conversation. You
Absolutely.
couldn't be doing it
Yeah.
post haste. You'd have to,
Right.
you'd have to go in with that
Yeah.
intention and fulfill it.
Okay, general standards continue, 6, 7, and 8. Building code requirements. To ensure the dwellings meet appropriate health and fire safety standards, they have to meet the adopted building code standards. No surprise there. Size. The gross floor area of the ADU, not including any related garage, shall be no more than 750 square feet and shall not be greater in area than the principal dwelling unit. So this is one that we kind of bounce back and forth on a few times as to, the appropriate size. We talked about there's some pretty small homes in Soldotna, relatively speaking. One of my old coworkers, her home was somewhere between 850 and 900 square feet. Pretty small, but still bigger than the 750. And then we also talked about, maybe it should be a percent of the principal dwelling unit. So, we went back and forth and we ended up here. But again, we'd be interested in hearing comments about how to identify the appropriate size for an accessory dwelling unit.
I think, again, if the intent is primarily to accommodate families that might have, a disabled member or whatever that would have their own small dwelling kind of thing, I think leaving it there, leaving it 750, relatively small, but yet adequate for what the intent is, I think.
It certainly allows smaller ones, so if somebody wanted to build a 200 square foot, and they could do that. It just kind of puts the upper cap on it.
Is the upper cap important, since you already said that it needs to be subordinate to the main dwelling and it has to be less than 20% coverage of the area?
I think it just goes to the concept of ADUs, that they're smaller in size than the principal dwelling.
What if I need mine to be 758 feet?
It wouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, I'm just.
Can you have,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
will we end up with some conditional use permits with,
No,
no? Okay.
no, you wouldn't end up with any conditional use permits or variances. Variances wouldn't be allowed.
I think we don't need that, because.
What if we made it a
small enough.
percentage of the footprint of the, as long as it didn't exceed
I think it's
the
already.
20%? Like it couldn't be more than 75% of the footprint of the larger house?
Yeah, we played around.
And also not to exceed the 20% of the coverage?
Right. We played around a little bit with different percentages, and I think the last one we looked at was 40%. And we looked at what's kind of this average house size, 1,400, 1,600, 1,800 square feet. It varies, but it's somewhere in there. And so let's see, if it's 1,400, that's 140, 280, 560 at 40%. A bigger house would have a bigger 80, bigger size accessory dwelling unit. I guess the other thing I would encourage you to do is to picture this in your neighborhoods and what it would look like to have, two houses or a house and an ADU, and how would it fit? What size is going to be right so that You do know one, as Caitlin was saying, is essentially subordinate to the other. You know, it's the ADU, that it doesn't, that it continues community character,
Or not
neighborhood
just
character.
doubling the neighborhood, more
Right.
houses closer to.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure, you know, we aren't sure that we came up with the right answer. And we looked at a number of other codes, and they vary in their different techniques, is how they get there. Some just have a number like this, others have a percent, some have a percent and a not to exceed, some have maximums, some have minimums. So it's, you know, some have both. So it's all over the place.
Just thinking of the person that's going to be using it as a, you know, a guide, or whomever is going to be using it as a cabin kind of thing for clients, right? And they can only have one. Your example of the 19 is a good one to put reference to. I mean, he saw you know, as long as he had a big enough piece of property, he didn't have to subdivide, he didn't have to do anything, and he could have 19 dwelling units.
Right.
Right? And those would largely be rentals, I assume, whatever the developer was wanting to do, because they weren't going to be resold as single family or anything else. So just, you know, that, I think putting some restrictions helps alleviate that potential, I don't know if you'd say misuse, but not the intent of why to have this accessory building. Neither do we want 26-year-old children living there, you know, or 27 or 32.
Except for when the economy collapses. Thanks, Mom.
Any other thoughts or comments on the size of ADUs before we move on? We can always come back, too. Let's go to 8-yard setbacks. So A is the ADU shouldn't encroach into any setbacks. B is that they have to be at least 60 feet from the front line, or at least 10 feet behind the front plane of the principal dwelling unit. So the concept there is that the ADUs behind the principal dwelling unit, with the exception of, there may be instances we've talked where someone like in the rural residential that has an acre or more might have their building towards the back, and the only available space is towards the front. What this does is, well, it pushes it at least 60 feet back. And C, accessory dwelling units taller than 15 feet shall be set back at least 10 feet from the side lot lines. As I mentioned, side lot lines in most of these dwelling units is 5 feet. And so what this does is, if you're going to have a taller structure, it has to be moved an extra 5 feet from the side lot line. Hopefully preserving some light coming into your neighbor's yard. Parking. So we've got a number of parking standards. The following standards shall apply as required. So parking, one off-street parking space in addition to the parking spaces required for the principal dwelling unit are required. So we typically require 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. What this is saying is you only need 1 for an ADU. So you would need, in this instance, a total of 3 parking spaces. And that can be accomplished many different ways. You know, if you've got a 1 or 2 car garage, there's 1 or 2 spaces. Most driveways accommodate at least 1, if not 2, 3, or 4 cars. So we don't envision the parking requirement going to be an issue or a problem with regard to the number. Parking is not permitted with any area which is required for landscaping, and parking is not permitted on lawns within the front yards. That's something that we've noticed is kind of becoming a thing in Soldotna, people parking in the front lawns. And some of it, I think, is because of, you know, we all love the outdoors, and so we've got all the toys, right? We got the boat, we got the trailers, we got the
And we don't offer street
ATVs.
parking.
And we don't offer street parking, so it's got to go somewhere. So, but what this is saying is for, if you're going to build an ADU, you need to have an appropriate place to park your car, and it shouldn't, your first thought shouldn't be the lawn. Accessory dwelling units shall use a common driveway with the principal dwelling unit unless otherwise authorized by the administrative officer. So this is, again, encouraging, incentivizing, hopefully, using existing infrastructure rather than creating new infrastructure. Paving is required for new driveways or expansion of driveways when you're already adjacent to a paved street.
For B, is it, I know that the Watershed Forum had parking on, I don't know if it was called like green parking or something, but it wasn't paved, but they had done the like D1, D2, they had done different gravel work underneath so that it was basically the same or better than an asphalt parking. I'm just trying to think of all the things that, all the
Yeah.
holes. I guess it's different than a lawn, but just,
Yeah, if it was constructed like that,
yeah.
I think we would consider that to be a driveway. We
Parking,
would
yeah.
encourage it, right? I know the Watershed Forum actually did have some problems with the grid that they
Yeah.
used below ground
Yeah.
to create the strength. They got caught up in plows.
Oh, okay. The
But
geogrid
there's-
fabric,
But
yeah.
there's different methods to do it, and it just may have been their specific choice on their, particular choice of plastic that they used at that time. But, yeah, no, that's something that we would encourage, is to have parking that allows for drainage and
Mhm.
accepts runoff rather than puts it somewhere else. Mark, does that
Yeah.
get at your parking questions? Okay.
So if it's 750 square feet, but if you build a garage underneath it, can you go more than 750 feet if you have a garage underneath?
And not including.
Yeah.
It's 750 square feet of living space.
Right.
Not the footprint.
Right. 700, not including any related garage.
Okay.
And, yeah, like Jenny's question, so it's not footprint, it's
Living
living space.
Yeah, I
Space.
guess I was imagining it being the footprint, but, okay.
Because if it was
If
just
it's
footprint, you could
two-story,
do
then
two,
you're right. Then
three,
you
four,
could have a
five
1,500
stories.
square foot at 750, yeah. Just a two-story. So you could do a carriage house. You could build a
Yeah.
garage, a
Right.
detached garage and a
House above it, or,
house above it.
right, or apartment above it.
750 square foot house above the
Right.
garage.
1,500 total, yeah. I lied, there were 16 standards, not 15. Utilities, to the extent allowed by law, the ADU shall be connected to the water, sewer, and electric utilities of the principal dwelling unit. However, lots with on-site water or septic can have separate septic systems for their ADU. So this is was a big question for us, and you'll see as we get to the end of the presentation, because our current code does not allow for this, our utility code doesn't allow for it. It says basically, if you have another building on your lot, it has to have a separate connection to the water and sewer mains. And as we were talking earlier, that becomes prohibitively expensive when you're doing these things. And so what this allows
Can
is,
attest.
pardon?
I
You can
can
attest, yeah. What this allows then is for the extension of those, or connecting, wiring into your existing services and providing for that service. Number 11 is accessory dwelling units may not be placed within the overlay district, the Kenai River Overlay District. 12 is parcels with ADUs may have one short-term rental unit, provided either the ADU or the principal dwelling unit is owner occupied. So this one we went back and forth on, and what we want to encourage is we don't want them both to turn into short-term rentals, but we also understand that there are people that may be have financial issues, and this is a way for them to improve their financial situation by offering this. So, but what it does is it it requires them to live in one of the two units.
What if someone's a snowbird and they don't even live in it? just
They could
can't-
rent it
they
out
just can't
long-term.
Rent it out. Okay.
Short-term, right. They can
Oh,
rent it out
short-term rentals,
long-term.
okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So they can rent it out, both units long-term, not a problem.
Mhm.
Where do we leave off?
It's not better to leave it empty. That was
Oh,
the third
right.
thing I was thinking of, if they
Yeah.
can't have to live in it.
Okay. 13, accessory dwelling units must possess a valid physical address. 14, an ADU may not be divided or sold apart from the principal dwelling. That's important, especially since we've got now these connected to the same utilities as the principal dwelling. 15, a mobile home, recreational vehicle, or travel trailer shall not be used as an ADU. Basically ADUs, as you'll see in 16, are going to require a permanent building foundation per our building code.
Number 11, is that our restriction or the Kenai River Overlay District's?
That would be
restriction?
a restriction. Well, it's combination. So under the Kenai River Overlay District, within the 50 to 100 area, certain things, a number of things are allowed within that area. As you probably remember, the different things have been approved within there, everything from decks to houses and whatnot. What this is saying is ADUs, if you're going to do one, you can't put it in there at all. That area is intended for habitat protection, and find a place outside of that area.
That's more than 60 feet, or that's 10
100
feet
100 feet.
back from the, or,
100 feet from the ordinary high water mark of the river, yeah.
but then more
It's
than at least 60 feet from the road. So usually the road is what you would consider, I mean, is that what you would consider the front of the house?
Yeah,
From the access
right,
road?
correct.
Okay, so there's going to be, if they can fit one there, it's going to be a small.
If they're in the rural residential, I mean, it could be,
Yeah, when they may have bigger lot, right?
or,
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of homes also that,
We can look at that, but I don't think it's going to be an issue between the 100 and 60. I'll make a note for us to research that.
doesn't the 60-foot refer to if they're not doing it?
If they can't set it
Right.
back 10 feet.
So, right,
yeah.
so they could have,
Bigger window.
They could kind of
right,
put it in
it
line
actually,
with the house.
you're right, increases the window,
Okay.
is what you're saying, right, John?
Right.
Yeah, okay. Okay. So those are all the general standards for ADUs. And then, Charlene, I think you were asking about expiration, right?
Yes.
Here we go, finally. Expiration of an ADU. Approval of an ADU expires when the use is not commenced within 18 months of issuance of a zoning permit, or when the ADU is altered and is no longer in conformance with the code, or if the property ceases to maintain the required off-street parking spaces for the accessory or principal dwelling unit.
And then what happens?
Their ticket is pulled as far as being an allowable ADU. So they would have to find some other use for it, a storage shed or garage, or
Or they get fined?
that's also,
I see that down here, these
Correct.
fines. Is that
yeah,
a day or is that
that is
just?
per day, right. Variances, I mentioned earlier, variances wouldn't be granted under this. And the reason is, under our variance code and under, honestly, all variance codes, the standard is whether, if the variance wasn't granted, would we be depriving a property owner of the reasonable use of their real property? And the answer here is no. If they've already got a principal structure, they've got reasonable use of their property. So there's no way that a variance could be issued under our standards because they've already got the reasonable use of their property.
I can see a lot of small tweaks in there. I could brainstorm lots of silly scenarios, but that wouldn't be that silly. maybe someone's like, I want to create an ADU only for pedestrians, so I don't need the parking requirement. Or I want to create, 758 square feet is my design and I can't make it smaller. How do we make this slightly flexible so that if there's something that we didn't foresee when we wrote this code, that we can have a little bit of flexibility
I think
for
we would,
folks?
I think we would do that in the standards themselves then, rather than in the variance, because we can't do it in the variance section. But if you wanted to have a range of sizes, 700 to 800, or, you know, whatever. There's always going to be the case where you move to 800 and they're going to want the 808
right.
foot. But,
Well, that's what I was thinking, that's why I was thinking if it was like a percentage of the size of the, you know, not, whichever is greater or something like that, you know,
Right.
or lesser, whatever, however you figure it out, so that there's like a little bit of flexibility in relation to the primary structure. So that,
Yeah.
that part would be somewhat individual.
well, that, honestly, that's where I started, was in relationship to the principal structure. But like I say, I don't have a strong feeling one way or another.
Well, there are some 900 square foot homes. in our
There are.
neighborhoods, quite a few, and 750 is gonna almost look the same,
Right,
so.
right.
You might want it to actually be smaller on that lot, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it might be a
Yeah, and again,
better place to
if you're
start with
trying to
in relation to
hold the character of the neighborhood, then, you know, if someone maximizes that and depending upon the size of their principal residence, now you've got two fairly good-sized buildings on the residence. And one's behind the other, presumably, but nonetheless, they'd still have to comply with the rules, so.
Well, and if you have a 900 square foot house and then you put a 750 square foot footprint of a carriage house, you know, that ADU is gonna definitely look like the primary. Or it's maybe not, because looks like a carriage house, but it's gonna be bigger essentially than the original structure.
So at the beginning of this, you mentioned, John, or it mentions the home occupation. How does that weave in here or not?
Home occupation.
Somebody wants to have their home business and they want a separate accessory building, not their principal residence. Allowed? You know, it's not a dwelling, you know, it could be built as a dwelling unit, but it is not, it could be used otherwise, or would that be against the code?
Yeah.
Like, if I wanted to build one and have it be my sewing studio, but not rent it or no one live in there, because I thought of that. Could I do that?
Or
Like,
have it
have
be
a
your-
craft,
Your
a
home
she
office.
shed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, there's nothing in here that says you have to rent it.
So I guess, what if
A craft
Charlene
room.
just did want to build a she shed? Does she have to do a zoning permit and
Yes.
building permit and all of
Yep.
those things too? Any kind of shed, any kind of permanent
Well,
structure?
But I want a
anything-
bathroom
Right,
and a
anything that's,
kitchen.
right, that's
So-
got
But
those,
she'd be getting a different, she'd be saying it's something different. It's a,
well, it would have to fit under some section of code, and the only one it would fit under would be the ADU.
okay.
Yeah,
So right now, someone can't build an accessory
they can build a shed.
home office.
They could build a shed, but if it's a habitable structure, it has to meet the building code. So it's gonna have to have the fixtures, it's gonna have to have a toilet, it's gonna have to, you know, and, it's gonna be
Which is a
plumbed.
lot of money, Charlene, you're spending for that sewing room. I think I'd call it a shed. You might want to put some things in it, but,
Well,
you know.
my sewing machine cost $20,000, so
Holy
gotta have a place for it.
Don't put a futon out there, because if we see you sleeping out there, we're gonna think you have the wrong permit.
Well, a big quilt machine, yeah. Built it like for the long arm.
Dennis, I'm gonna get back with you on the home occupations. I have to review that section of code on your question about home occupations.
Just how, would it intertie or completely different? And,
Okay.
and would someone try to run that up the flagpole?
And my comment on the variances is just anytime we write a new section of code, I think there's things that we didn't foresee. And I would like somehow for there to be flexibility for people who are interested in this new use. Or at least for us too, when we are, and if it needs to be some other place, or if we can offer conditional uses or variances or something.
Okay.
I think the idea of it being compatible with the look and style of the neighborhood, I know it's hard to judge that and hard to know how you would get around that. But also just any neighborhood that has covenants and like a homeowners association or anything like that is because there is kind of a culture of a neighborhood, what it looks like. And that doesn't mean that everyone that lives in it sees eye to eye. Sometimes there's one or two that like to do things very differently, which is kind of why, since this is the city, we are trying to create standards that protect the other neighbors from, something too crazy. I agree that we like to have the freedom to do things on our own land, but in Alaska, there's a lot, like 90% of people don't live in the city, and they do lots of all kinds of stuff on their land. But in the city, I would just want to have some forethought on how to.
I think we can tie it back into the 2023 plan of improving the look of the city of Soldotna, and that desire that I think most of us are projecting to have the properties be in likeness to the principal property.
Yeah, and I think in terms of somebody comes in, they would like to do it, to almost have examples. Here's some good examples of what we're looking for if you're going to build that unit. It should have have some, it should look like the existing, or at least have some sense that it's part of the existing construction.
And if we did, I know you don't want to have variances and such, but if there could be conditional use permits.
Yeah, we can't
Then
have variances.
We can't?
No.
Okay. Because maybe I'll just finish this and then you can
Sure.
see if there's any workaround. Because if someone was going to do something and they came to you and it's completely administrative and you're like, I don't see anything in the code that prevents us from saying yes to this, but I know that the neighbors are not going to like it.
Yeah.
If there was a conditional use permit, then the neighbors would be notified and they could come and
Right, yeah,
and,
yeah.
weigh in on it, and I don't know. So
Yeah, no,
I
Caitlin's mentioned
have
the
no idea how that works on
CUP
that end of
could
it,
be
but
an
it's
option
I think it's
for
important.
that. I just don't, we'd have to come up with, what are the triggers that pushes it into the CUP process?
Right.
And so that's something we can
Which
look
could
at
be
more
like
at.
height and shape, or like things that are outside standard. And when they do their building permit, they assume have to have at least hand-drawn plans, if not architectural plans.
I'm not
of some
sure. of
kind, so
the
that you have an
specific-
idea of what it's going to look like.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
sure what our building official requires
Right.
as far as the level of detail, whether engineered or architect stamped or whatever. I'm not sure. We do have a couple more slides.
Yeah.
Let me run through those. And we've got Peggy here too, and she may have some questions and comments. So this is the change that would be in the section 1.08. These fines would be added to our section on code enforcement. And the idea here is because this is, if you go forward with an ADU, it's not something you're likely going to back out of. So the fine should be substantial. It's not like letting your dog run loose for a day. You can correct that problem. This, if you go ahead and build it, it's more likely than not, it's going to be, asking for forgiveness, and there should be some financial disincentive there, or financial incentive to do what's right. So those are the suggested fines if you're operating an ADU illegally
or if you fail to obtain an ADU permit.
Is this a one-time fine, or is this?
It could be daily. All of our minor offense fines are daily. We've never issued a multi-day fine, though. It's, 1 day is
Basically, when it's discovered, you're fined, you need to come in compliance immediately. Each day you're out of compliance, we're going to
Could result in
assess
a
the
fine, right, it
result.
could, yeah. We don't operate with fines first, we operate with, we received a complaint, please fix it. If they don't fix it, then they receive a notice of violation. If they don't fix it after the notice of violation, then we start thinking about fines.
So it's a process that they have multiple opportunities.
Yes, they do.
And what constitutes an unlawful use?
We have to go back to something in violation of the general standards, so I'm looking for a good example here.
It could be the owner occupied
There
with
you
a
go.
short-term
That's a
rental
very good
issue.
example, right? Or if they are parking on the lawn, or if they are, let's see. Yeah, the owner occupied one is probably the big one, that if they're not living there and they're renting both units out as short-term rentals, that would be one where, that fine would be appropriate.
Or using it for a business, is that one of the other?
Yeah, if they're potentially, if they were using it as a business, they would probably be fined for a violation of the zoning district, the zoning code, rather than the short-term rental, because it's more applicable, because businesses generally are not allowed within that zoning district unless it's a home occupation. And then
Like a
there's,
salon or an accountant or a daycare?
yeah, exactly, right. So
Those-
if you got a small sewing business, if
Something
you've
you're allowed
got,
to do in your home?
exactly.
If you did it in
Right.
the ADU, it would be
It
illegal?
would-
Or,
No, it would be allowed within an ADU.
Oh, it
So-
would be,
So
okay,
if that's your,
okay.
if you're living in that ADU, you're renting it, and you also want to have your home occupation there, that's fine. But if somebody was, for example,
I was thinking
fixing
of the homeowner.
cars
just using
in
that
the,
one?
in the
yeah.
driveway,
Yeah.
and that's a home occupation that isn't allowed, then that would be a violation of the zoning code, and they would potentially get a letter from us for that. We had, let's see, did that one. Okay, so here we are now talking about utilities. The first couple slides deal with water lines. And the underline again is the new text. So it says a separate water service connection shall be provided for each separate residential or commercial structure except for accessory dwelling units approved under SMC 1710-390. And then also, again, when they're talking about intertying, that it is allowed for accessory dwelling units. And then in addition to this, let's see, is it on the next one? No, but our utility manager is also looking to create some language to allow for a waiver in unique circumstances where the example he gave is, let's say somebody wants to put a sink in their garage so they can wash up after they've done whatever they're doing, whether it's gardening or working on the car, they've got a place to clean up in the garage rather than in the house. He wants to have an exception to allow under these unique type circumstances where they can connect back into the main line of the house rather than running another line off the main. So that's something we don't have yet, but it's, right now this is all the attorneys getting reviewed.
It's just a garden hose
Garden hose works too, yeah,
with a connection, of course.
right. Sewer service line. So the first one was the water line, sewer service line. This language in both sections of code is identical, and so the changes are identical. There's an exception now for accessory dwelling units to have that intertied utility.
And that is all we've got on accessory dwelling units.
And this
Peggy?
is, and
Oh,
yeah, sorry, this is an informal conversation, so if you'd like to make any comments, Peggy, feel free to come forward. Or it's nice to, if you don't mind, thank you, yeah, turning the mic on, and then it will be part of the meeting. But we don't have to do any formal, does she need to state her name? Yeah.
I know who she is.
No, yeah.
I'm sorry I got the ball rolling here. You've done a lot of work on this, and you may have already been considering this usage, but I have now moved in with my mother into the 1963 house that arrived on a big truck and was constructed. I'm thinking that it is about 800 square feet, and I should do a better job of measuring. And the property that that little house is on on a lot that's 282 feet long and 162 feet deep on the Kenai River. And I was prompted to think about, because of climate change, I wanted to work with the architects who did the bookstore building, who are pretty good at their work. And I wanted to design another structure on that property that would be as fire resistant as possible, with air filter, with solar as much as possible, with a battery that could run a little water from a cistern up to the solar panels on the roof in case we had to evacuate. So that's was kind of driving my interest. And I wanted to build what could be a prototype for possible 3 units maybe behind the bookstore building. And I wanted the bottom floor to be completely handicap accessible. And I wanted an upstairs unit for, in my case, for family, eventually, possibly, and whichever sister in her 70s now that had the best knees would be upstairs. And so I'm glad to hear that the possible original house could possibly become the accessory building if it fit the 750 square feet, and that might mean removing the screened sleeping porch that my mom added. But I was a little concerned to hear that we might have to put a building 60 feet in from the main driveway that I share with my neighbors. And then also 100 feet back from the river.
So it's either.
Because we have 162 feet, so.
So the ADU would have to be either 10 feet behind your existing building, your existing home, or at least 60 feet from the front, the road, from the front property line. So it might be possible in your case to be, I don't know, this, I wrote down, I want to look at that property specifically and see if it would work, if this as written would work. If not, it furthers the case for Caitlin's suggestion of having opportunities for CUPs, conditional use permits for unique circumstances.
And it's interesting what's happened on Lingonberry Lane. There are a couple of older homes there, not quite as old as the one that Margie and I live in now. But there are now 1, 2, 3 very large homes there. And you're welcome to walk or drive by and look. So it's difficult to, it might be difficult to match. Although if I had a small 2-story building, it would be next to a large 2-story house, but set as far away from that as possible because they are porch-like people. So I would tend to cluster it near and then there are 2 log cabins at the end of the street that were built in the early 50s, right after oil was discovered in Swanson River. And they, my cousin, Suzanne Mack, who grew up on the homestead anyway, bought the 2 cabins, she and her husband. So those are 2, I'm sure they're already, everything is way too close to the river already. Everything was figured that nothing would ever, ever lose bank or anything. So we have had to drill a new well because they own it used to feed 3 units. And so we had Kraxberger drill a new well this summer. And I have put off my architect until I find out a little bit more about what this ordinance might look like to see whether we could even manage to fit in whatever the requirements are here. But I think I understand that we could share a septic if the DEC approved. We'd be close enough to do that. Anyway.
Yeah, it'll probably depend on what your tank is rated at, how many bedrooms it can serve.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. Anyway, so we need to, move forward. I certainly wouldn't be thinking about construction this year, but I would like to have the winter to plan something with these Wonder Women. And yeah, but we should get the well into Margie's house now. It's good that we can share it with a second unit. And yeah, if there's any questions, I haven't explained myself very well, but anyway.
I have one, maybe group question. So the 60 feet from the front of the house lot line or 10 feet away, you don't have to meet both, you just have to meet one or the other.
Correct.
Okay, so that's clarifying. And what is just the general standard for lot lines is 10 feet or?
It depends on the zoning district you're in. So for most of them are at least 20 feet front yard setback. Usually it's a matching front and rear, so 20 front, 20 rear. And then depending on what zoning district you're in, most are either a 5-foot or a 10-foot side yard setback.
Okay, so basically, yeah. What's the thinking behind the 60-foot, or 60 feet?
So if you were, for example, on a larger lot and maybe your house is placed towards the back of the lot and you didn't have room to put it behind or 10 feet back, you're still 60 feet off the road, so you're preserving that neighborhood character. It's about character and that intent. So the ADU doesn't become the look of the neighborhood where, if they were allowed in the front yard, that would become the predominant look. It wouldn't preserve the neighborhood character.
Which is actually the opposite of what Peggy's talking about, is that the existing structure would become the ADU under the proposed use, and the other one would be the front of, would hopefully meet the compliance of 60 feet setback, you know.
And
Or 10 feet
Or 10
behind.
feet from
of
her
course,
cabin.
we think of the river as the front.
Right.
Yeah.
And is that what you're thinking
No.
as well?
No.
So
We
it's
would-
distance from the street is the front?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Your access point, yeah.
One thing, and you and Jen know the map, so maybe this doesn't apply very much, but if someone did have a wider, not so deep lot, and they had built, 20 feet off the back, and they only had 30 feet in front, or does that ever happen? Or 40 feet in front, then you couldn't apply
It's
yours.
possible.
No matter how you did
Right.
it, you wouldn't be able to get.
I guess, yeah, the one thing to remember is that, in most cases, the lot is already developed with a principal use, and people have their main use already developed. It isn't, this isn't intended to be, essentially a guaranteed right that every lot shall have the ability to have an ADU.
Okay.
It's an opportunity where the circumstances permit that fit, provided those things like community character and space and open space, all those things are still provided within the code.
I was just looking at this picture on page 2, which is a neighborhood that's pretty different than ours. But, I mean, the two dwellings are very close together and very close to the street, just maybe more like a Spokane neighborhood or something.
I think I missed it.
That one right there.
This one?
Yep.
Okay.
Just,
You know, they didn't meet the 60 feet.
they did not.
Okay.
Or they're 10 feet, but they are 10 feet away from the other house, which is an either or requirement.
Thank
Well, they
you.
didn't leave much green space.
Thank you,
in there.
Peggy.
Thanks for all your work on this.
Yeah, and if you have specific questions, you can contact Jen or I, and we'd be happy to chat with you. Nothing's set in stone at this point, and we can look at yours as an example and see how it would fit and how it would work, and see, we could apply these kinds of standards and see how does it work. It's always good to have examples like that.
And the architect might have ideas too.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Yeah.
So that's all.
Was there
We've got- oh,
a
go ahead.
requirement that the accessory dwelling can only have one bedroom?
There's not.
Okay, I don't know where I came up with that. Good.
Some
Okay.
municipalities do limit the number of bedrooms.
Okay,
and
I was going to
bathrooms.
suggest eliminating that if we, I thought that I heard that somewhere, so.
Is Kenai doing this?
I don't know whether Kenai is. I'm not sure whether they've got standards already adopted or if they're thinking about it, but it's something that Anchorage went through about 4 or 5 years ago. And in fact, some of our graphics are stolen from Anchorage. And I was going to mention too, because somebody had mentioned about education information. There's some on the West Coast, some communities have actually kind of developed kind of the 2 or 3 designs that are already pre-approved, engineered, approved. So if you wanted to develop one of these, you can just go ahead and, do it simple. Here's a pre-approved design. You just need to locate where you want it on your lot, and away you go. No expense in that, saves you a few bucks that way. One of the interesting things in the Anchorage pamphlet, they come right out and say in their education piece to the public, this is not a cheap, this isn't a way to, turn a buck in a quick minute. These are expensive because you are, building to code standards. So it's still going to be a pricey endeavor for most people, but it'll be hopefully less than building a new home.
It might be interesting to have like the payback period, if like
for example, like have an example of like if you built an ADU, typically they cost this much, and so, yeah. it's
Depends
nice.
on if you're renting it or living in it, or,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
Well, and with an aging population, you know, when you think about long-term, you think that it's going to be marketable at some point when you don't need it, because it will be attractive to someone who's in a similar circumstance.
And speaking of, do we
And there
have
aren't
any-
that much of it. There isn't that much of it.
Do we have any idea between the city and the borough, how much it's going to increase property value, how it'll be taxed, for property tax wise?
No, but they,
Increase there?
yeah, they,
property
I mean, they should be able to tell us on a per square foot basis what, you know, what homes, you know, we should be able to figure that out.
Would it just
on
be
a-
valued exactly like a home, or will it have a different?
I don't,
I would think it'd have a
Scale.
different value because you can't sell it, you can't, you know, it's part of the structure.
Right.
It's part of the property.
it'd be like a garage on steroids.
Like increase its square footage or something?
Pardon?
Just increase the square footage maybe?
Possibly, yeah, I'm really not sure. That's an interesting question.
It's something for people to think about that are thinking of doing it. And the permit is a one-time permit, right? It's like a building permit. It's not like
Correct.
to keep a permit to keep.
You get your ADU
It's not
permit
like an
and you're,
active-
right, you're good. You don't have to renew it on an annual basis or anything like that.
I was looking at a case study from Santa Cruz, and just kind of touching back up on keeping the ADU compatible with the design we want. They provide, basically, the city provides a ADU plan sets book where the architects have a list of designs that people who are interested can choose from, and they provide a nice set of, basically a manual to help some of the homeowners do this, and I don't know if that's something we'd want to.
Where was that?
This is, hold on a second.
Santa Cruz?
Oh,
Yeah,
that
it's,
was it.
yeah, there you go. This particular, I can send you the website, but it contains some case studies from Santa Cruz, Portland, Massachusetts, and whatnot.
Yeah, in general, a manual or a guide to help homeowners do the right thing is, I think, better, the carrot better than the rules of like, if you, or, it's kind of the same thing, but just sort of like a guide to help,
Nice to have carrots and sticks.
right?
A little bit of
Carrot
everything.
sticks.
Carrot sticks, there you go. Beat you with a carrot stick.
So the planned unit development you're wanting to add to the commercial, is the ADU available for commercial properties?
It is not being proposed for commercial.
Okay. Is it restricted? I hadn't even thought about that, because I have some empty space on my commercial property.
You could put in
I could
for a
put
conditional
residential.
use permit to build a home there.
Residential, yeah, okay.
Yep.
No, I mean, I've thought about doing a commercial with residential over,
Right.
which.
I think the
know there's
reason
no
that
restriction
Mountain
to that,
Rose
but-
went the way they did with that planned unit development is that they didn't meet the requirements from the city because of the total size of the lots and configuration, and so that's why the PDU made sense. Because then they could consolidate it differently, you know, and get a maximum use of the property at the same time, you know.
Yeah, and that's the intent of the planned unit development, to come to creative solutions and provide some flexibility in those unique circumstances. I think that developer was from the Mat-Su area, if I
He
remember
was.
right. Okay.
He was.
And had he done some up there too?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep, yeah.
Well, thank you all. Appreciate it. It's been a good session. We got lots of good feedback.
So next step, John, for this?
We're going to go back and take your comments and do some research. And we're also waiting to hear back from our attorney. They just got it here this week. But we want to make sure that it's in the general sense that we're tying all of our loose ends up, that we've got all the right code connections here and there. And then what we would do next is make some refinements based on comments and based on our attorneys, and then either bring it back here or take it to the work session at council. I'm not sure at this point. Depends on how major the changes would be. But we'll keep you informed. Thanks.
Thank you guys for
Well put
all
together.
the work, yeah, very, very good.
I was like, what? I thought that I don't know how I just came up with that in my head. Good.
So am I the second string?
Well, as you can see, maybe you're the first string, because I didn't get one. Uh-oh. Oh, no, it's the fancy one. It's only because I live in the Gulch. Do you want to, Jenny, do you want to see maybe?
One of the fascinating things about that PUD, that mountain range.
Uh-huh.
Because then maybe we could have a, yeah.
So, I guess, do you want to just, you can figure it out tomorrow, like,
Probably next week would be better for me.
if it's the people that are setting
Is next week okay for you?
What was the rationale for the 15-year-old?
They just took care of mom.
Yeah, sounds good. And maybe we, in the meantime, you and I could like peek at the
You
one
had a handicap
to
back.
see like what is exactly in it that's been hard for.
So, it's just amazing. Yeah. In the 70s, say, oh, no, I'll never do that.
No, I get it, yeah.
That'd be cool.
Well, after my mom fell down the stairs, how many times, my dad couldn't pick her up anymore.
That's the reality.
Exactly, yeah. Yep, thanks.
I've had some too, so, yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, like, they work with me too, so, but it's just, yeah, it's like, nope, it's the way it is.
City trees are hard, right? Like, those outlet stands small,
Thanks. You guys.